Viewers, in my previous video, I had analyzed a few peace processes, talks and agreements with the terrorists, which all had ended in failure and initiation of the terrorist attacks across the country. In light of the repeated failures of the talks with the same lot of terrorists, it is quite clear that only good intention is not enough to have successful talks. So there is a need to have a formula or a yardstick to make correct decision to start or not to start talks at a particular point in time. There can be many approaches in this regard. I have coined a formula termed STOP, which stands for strength, tenacity, objectives and previous pacts. So to decide to initiate or not to initiate talks with terrorists, this formula should be used to have a fair idea of whether these talks would be successful or not. Strength. Are the terrorists in a position of strength or weakness? This question is essential to be addressed to make a decision before entering into talks. All the previous rounds of talks and agreements show that whenever the terrorists were on the rampage, they would try to dictate their own point of view, or they would try to extract more concessions. Before the military operation Zarb-e-Azb, TTP was offered talks many times by the government, but they refused, which shows their arrogance and their confidence in their strength and the will to fight. For example, in November 2012, when there were some horrendous terrorist attacks in Karachi, Peshawar, Rawalpindi and Dera Ismail Khan during Muharram, the then Interior Minister offered peace talks to the terrorists, which they rejected outrightly, and they vowed to fight till the ouster of the secular government. So this sort of strategic flaws were repeated time and again, trying to talk with the terrorists when they were in the position of strength. And now, even now, it seems that the terrorists are quite emboldened and feel stronger after the Afghan Taliban have come into power in Afghanistan. The second cardinal element of STOP formula is to assess the tenacity of the terrorists to continue to fight. Previously, TTP had shown resilience to fight back even when their command and control structure were demolished in tribal areas, and they fled away to Afghanistan and started fighting from the strategic depth of the hideouts in Kunnar and Nuristan provinces of Afghanistan, and they launched attacks inside Pakistan. And for last 1.5 years, we again see that they are carrying out terrorist attacks continuously, especially in KP and Balochistan. During the last 2 months, there has been considerable increase in their terrorist attacks in these areas. So they are quite tenacious. Third is objectives. How solid and strong are the objectives of the terrorists? As far TTP is concerned, ever since they were the foot soldiers and errand boys of Al-Qaeda from 2003, and then they became the full-fledged group in 2007, they have been changing their objectives and aims and narratives. Initially, they claimed that they were fighting for the ouster of American and foreign forces from Afghanistan. Immediately, they added that enforcement of Sharia was their aim. At one point in time, Maulvi Fakir Muhammad, the deputy commander of TTP, said that they had two preconditions for talks. One, that Pakistan should review its relationship with the US, and secondly, enforcement of Sharia in the country. And now, interestingly, again it has changed its objective, as Noor Wali Masood, the TTP chief, appeared on CNN and said that their struggle was for liberation of the tribal areas in Pakistan, and they wanted to attack the security forces. Their fight was against the security forces of Pakistan. Constant change in their aims and objectives and narratives is their weakness. So previous pacts, it is absolutely essential to review the fate of the previous pacts and talks, what was their outcome. So, we see that almost all the talks and agreements and truces failed, which resulted in more violence in the country. The agreements or truces were violated on one excuse or the other. So, in light of the fate of these previous talks and truces, it can be easily predicted what would be the fate of the new talks or agreements with the terrorists. Out of 4 points of this formula, 3 clearly suggest to avoid talks with the terrorists now. The peace talks seem to be premature when the terrorists are exerting hard and are making their presence felt through their brutal attacks. Even if the talks start now, there is a likelihood that government might end up giving up more than it should. Yes, only if the terrorists agree to surrender, talks should be started. Thank you.